because we're scientists and we're always kind of siloed into our own little world. And, we could do our experiments how much ever we want. But I think we learn a heck of a lot more when we actually have and meet, these public facing events where we meet people, brewers, farmers, learn what they need and, what would better their lives.
You are listening to the Capital Craft Podcast, brought to you by the San Diego Brewers Guild. I am your co-host, Eric Fowler.
And I'm Jeff Fox, and I do the Beer Media Co. and Star Fox Media.
All the good communication.
All of it.
All the marketing. We are stoked to be sitting down with our guest, Arun, Associate Professor for San Diego State University, who is working on some pretty cool projects that are going on in San Diego County that most beer industry members probably don't know much about. Well, welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm super stoked to be here and talk to you folks about all the fun stuff we've been doing.
Yeah, so maybe you can give us an overview of the project, but how does one even get involved with academia and hops?
Well, this was sort of the way I got into hops was a really weird story as well, because, we were thinking about, involving our local students here at California State University, San Marcos, and San Diego State University, which are two of our largest sort of four-year universities in the area, and trying to get the students involved and trained in techniques, scientific methods and techniques, so then they could then take those techniques and then go back into our local industry, in whatever industry that could be. And so we were thinking about how to actually pitch this to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and then this is when all of this kind of came together, when CSU San Marcos was doing this big brewing certification program, and then we were like, okay, so we're gonna capitalize on this and then communicate and connect with some local hop growers to figure out what exactly are their needs and what are the kinds of problems that they've been facing. So that's what we did. We actually went out into the farms and connected with the farmers, and as well as went to a whole bunch of breweries to learn a little bit more about brewing and hops and yeast and sort
Tough
of
work, right?
Yeah,
Visiting breweries is always.
I mean, you go out there and then you get a beer at the end
science.
of it. I think it's all for science.
For science.
Exactly. So we did that, and we learned a lot about sort of the big problems that folks are facing here in San Diego County as hop farmers. Some of those predominantly to do with climate change and the fact that we are in a huge sort of desert area where we're facing extreme drought. Obviously, this year has been a different situation, but then the last few years have been considerably hard on our agricultural communities here. And so that's one of the factors, but then, hop farming also has a lot of other issues that come with it, including viral pathogens. You've got bacteria, you've got insects that, like to chew on the hop leaves. And, you've also got the fact that, San Diego County is not the largest place to grow hops in. Majority of hops that are grown in the U.S. are grown up in the Pacific Northwest.
Is that due to climate, or is it due to I can plant avocados and get a lot more?
Right. It's a bit of both, I think. Climate and soil predominantly, and a majority of the hops that were brought to the United States and domesticated for use in the United States were all sort of acclimated and adapted to local conditions in the Pacific Northwest. But funnily enough, there are parts of San Diego County that do have similar climatic and soil regimes as some places in the Pacific Northwest. So some of our mountain communities, for instance, in Julian and Ramona and some of these areas, have had pretty successful hop farming businesses over the last few years. Things have gone down over the last few years, and so we've really made that connection with academia to figure out if we can do the scientific experiments, involve students in that process, and make utilitarian solutions for some of our local hop farmers, so then they can build their businesses and then use that to feed into the breweries, which would be ideal, right? Because you buy local, you use San Diego grown hops for brewing San Diego based beer.
Yeah, and that's awesome. We worked on a project through the guild last year and some of the year prior called the San Diego State Beer Project.
Okay.
And it was to really help get the conversation started on what is local in San Diego. And you mentioned some of the mountain communities, which is I'm a Ramona native, and the viticulture up there and the amount of wineries that are fairly quality and really improved over the years is astounding.
It's surprising, isn't it? Like there's actually a lot out there.
Yeah, there's over 30. And Temecula Valley, I think, is a little more known because of the tourism infrastructure and being able to host weddings, whereas some of these Ramona vineyards are literally in people's yards.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, what they determined was a lot of these Italian varietals would do better. And you look at this, the terroir and the microclimates where they're being grown in Ramona, and it looks like Italy. And you see pictures of Italy, and you look at this diurnal shift that happens with these large temperature swings, and it makes sense. You have this, great sugar production and then this great acid production when it's getting cooler. So hearing that there's research being done on the hop side I get really excited. And I know our members probably feel the same way because they've been doing this with grapes for a couple decades now up there.
I think it's time to do the same with hops too, right? And the soil conditions matter quite a bit as well. And obviously the biggest issue though, or the elephant in the room, is that we're in a drought condition, and so irrigation is usually the biggest problem when we speak with a lot of these farmers. But then that also means, like you were mentioning, with viticulture, you do crop improvement projects where you're actually figuring out which strains of, in this case, grapevines, or in this case, hops, do better in our local environments so they can produce more yields in this case. Because if you take the same hop strains that grow really well and produce, maybe 20 pounds worth of hop vines on, in the Pacific Northwest, they probably don't produce as much down here in Southern California. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is because, water regimes are different, the soil regimes are different, and everything else, all that connection between the soil microbes and the fungi and the climate and the plant itself and the water, all of that come together. This complex ecosystem makes it that much more difficult for us to figure out. So then, we're really sort of just scratching the surface here with some of the projects we're doing, trying to decipher each one of those little movable parts.
Hi, brewers. Are you working on a special project, wondering how to get that delicious fruit flavor to come through your beer or seltzer? Well, S&S Flavors would love the opportunity to help you out. S&S Flavors has a wonderful MOQ of a single gallon, as well as quick turnarounds with all orders and samples, shipping out within 3 to 5 business days. Let's work together today and have samples in your hand by the end of the week. Check out www.ssflavors.com to fill out a sample request. Again, that's www.ssflavors.com to fill out a sample request. We can't wait to help you with all of your flavor needs today.
Now is a harder time than ever for breweries to navigate the rapidly changing market, but Beer Media Co. is here to help. As a proud partner of the San Diego Brewers Guild, we are a full-service digital marketing and content creation company that works with San Diego breweries to reach new customers and create amazing engagement for their websites and social media accounts. If you are a small brewery owner trying to figure out the whole social media thing, or a larger brewery looking to up their engagement, send us a message at info@beermedia.co, because we know SD Beer.
What are your students actually looking at? What are their individual projects on, and what does that program or department look like in terms of supporting these projects?
Yeah, so this is a 5-year grant that me and Dr. George Werlitis and Dr. James Jankovic at CSU San Marcos received from the USDA to develop these sort of complementary courses on research methods in agricultural sciences or ecology and evolution, both at San Diego State University and at Cal State San Marcos. And we all have very different trainings and expertise. I'm a geneticist by training. George happens to be a soil ecologist, and James is a virologist. And so we were like, you know what, this would be a perfect team for us to be able to do a variety of different experiments, right? Looking at, for instance, what is the composition of soil microbes, and do they actually vary when you think about US-based cultivars versus non-US-based cultivars of hops? And how much do they vary? And what is the relative composition of good fungi versus bad fungi in these soil communities? Do they have differences in growth rates between US-based cultivars or non-US-based cultivars? Are some of them more affected by a certain virus compared to others? Or are some of them more afflicted by pathogenic fungi like downy mildew compared to others? So these are a handful of experiments that we decided we're going to do in what we call as a common garden setting. So we essentially established, at least for the first year of this project, the students went and established this common garden experiment in a greenhouse here at CSU San Marcos, where we took 10 different cultivars of hops and 10 replicates of each. 5 of them are US-based cultivars, so these have been domesticated by the USDA and are commercially available.
And in layman's terms, you're probably talking about Centennial,
Cascade, Zeus, some of those, right?
Yeah.
Columbus, which are available and very commonly used by a lot of us, a lot of brewers in the US. As against ones that we obtained from outside the U.S. So these are things including Sorachi Ace, I think is from a Japanese cultivar, Fuggle, which was a UK-based cultivar, Southern Cross, I think was from Australia.
Yep.
So a handful of these. So what we were looking at really is to see if in Southern California, under these kind of climatic regimes, under the same kind of similar soils, if we plant all of these in a similar setting and keep them all at the same environment, and if there's no difference whatsoever in what we feed them or how we treat them, what are the differences that we see amongst these cultivars was what the big picture questions were. And so the students spent the entire semester collecting a bunch of data from these experiments. And so, we found some really interesting things from these preliminary results.
So you're initially looking at the ability to grow and sustain these cultivars. Are you from a brewer's perspective, there's the two main things that a brewer is going to be looking at is quality in terms of flavor, maybe quality in terms of stability, but that's in terms of storage and processing a little bit. And is there any way that you're actually quantifying like what matters to a brewer most, or is the first step just looking at, can we even grow the damn thing?
Yeah. So the first step is, can we even grow the damn thing?
Yeah.
But what we also did was very cool. We actually got a lot of these binds and we froze them, because ultimately we also want to be looking at the alpha and beta acid compositions, which are what predominantly make up the flavor from these hop strains as well. Because those are probably going to be different as well, depending on the environment. And so, you could grow the same plant in Pacific Northwest versus San Diego, but based on the soil quality and the microbes and the interactions between all of these, the alpha and beta acid compositions are probably also going to be different. And so, yes, we have frozen them. The students actually were trained in doing some liquid chromatography work as well to determine what the alpha and beta compositions would be. But yeah, that's down the line, definitely. And I think, especially because this is going to be preliminary data, we're going to be setting up starting this year, so 2024, we are going to be setting up a large-scale field experiment, a multi-year field experiment in the Santa Margarita Ecological Reserve, which is maintained by San Diego State University, where we will be growing at least 5 of those cultivars which we deemed as best growing from our common garden experiment. And we'll be setting up this experiment over multiple years, at least under 2 conditions. One would be a minimal drought condition, and another one would be a maximal drought condition, to see which ones are actually growing well and what those flavor profiles that are being produced by these would be.
So that's going to be taken into consideration, because I think it would be really important to get the brewing industry's input on, if you list these 5 cultivars, but they're not really anything that are widely used, or maybe they're just used for bittering, which would be great from a sustainability standpoint. But it wouldn't really be worth bragging about, right? When you're using these hops in different parts of the process, those different terpenes and acids are breaking down and being processed in different ways. So, it would be really cool to see that connection and see, here's the 5 that grow the best. Here's the next 5. Maybe the brewing industry is willing to pay a little bit more for these next 5, and let's look into those because they might be more applicable.
I totally agree. And actually, that's one of the big picture goals of this multi-year experiment too. And we'd love to partner with local breweries and folks that would be interested in probably, or even home brewers would be interested in potentially brewing with some of these cultivars that we will be developing as part of this multi-year experiment. Because we want to be growing things that are tasty. We don't want to be, like you said, right? I mean, it's like,
desirable because they want to, farmers would want to grow something that they could sell to,
exactly
at top dollar and everything.
And at the end of the day, we want to make some, be able to do some crop improvement strategies that would be both profitable for people here in Southern California, but also useful to the brewing industry down here.
And I know it's just a preliminary result, but is there a king of the hops for San Diego? Any standout so far?
Something really crazy that really popped out was in our experiments, we actually grew a Neomexicanus strain, which has been commonly used, I think, in brewing around down here. But that was the one that seems to be a standout. It has the highest growth rates within at least one growing period in a common garden setting compared to the others, which is super interesting. But then it's almost very obvious that the US-based cultivars are all doing considerably better than some of the non-US based ones, which is kind of expected because obviously they've been domesticated for that purpose over the last, 50 years, 60 years.
But it would be cool for something like an Australian strain to just all of a sudden be a standout where you're totally unexpected result. Would have been fun.
It would have been really fun. I agree.
When you're saying that they've been domesticated for domestic production, has there been hybridization or any genetic modification with any of these cultivars that you're looking at or in the industry, as a whole?
No genetic modification, but there's definitely been lots of hybridization. So one of the common things that any domesticated cultivars folks use is that as you keep domesticating, what happens is that genetically they become less and less diverse. So in other words, in agriculture we call this as monocultures, right? You develop sort of strains that are very minimally genetically diverse, which then stand the problems that if you have one fungus or a virus, it just wipes out the entire crop, right? And so a common thing that people use in agriculture and crop breeding programs to reintroduce diversity is to do what are called back crosses with some of the varietals, which are the original varietals, and hops have 5 of those varieties, including Neomexicanus, which is one of the local, or at least native to North American or Mesoamerican strain. And so when you do that, right, you're sort of reintroducing some of that diversity back into the population of these hops. And that tends to make the individuals or the crops a little bit more fit than their previous generation. But yeah, so there has been lots of this hybridization, which has happened, and a lot of farmers, homebrewers, people that grow them in a garden, right, do this all the time, right? They're like, what, this beer tastes good, that beer tastes good, so I'm going to just go ahead and cross these 2 plants. And you can do that with plants, right? It's really easy. And you just develop your own hybrid and, keep maintaining that hybrid over multiple generations. And now you got your own sort of hybrid. So there's several of those. Some of those which are commercially available, the USDA does curate a lot of these, and they have a giant database, which they maintain. We've been working with the USDA as well in developing sort of genetic markers for identifying some of these hop strains to see if they're actually hybrids. Are they commercially available strains? Where are they from? What is their sort of provenance? I think that's important, right? Because if you want to regulate these for a variety of purposes, you don't want to inadvertently, cause some, destructive virus to just wipe out all the hop crops up in the Pacific Northwest. That would be horrible, right? It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and so the USDA does regulate a lot of this, and so and they maintain this sort of giant genetic database, if you might, of all commercially available strains out there. Nothing to my knowledge is genetically modified, but then that's kind of not our purpose here. We're not trying to genetically modify plants. We're trying to better plants for a variety of purposes, right? We want to develop ones that are much more sustainable, especially in drought conditions. If we want to develop ones that are much more flavorful because they produce X amount of their alpha acids or Y amounts of their beta acids, how do we do that, right? How do we selectively pick and choose mom and dad so then the daughter plant will actually have a much better flavor? So that's kind of what we're trying to do.
It actually sounds interesting that like the findings that that one standout, is it Neomexicanus? Yeah, is actually one of the ones that are commonly back crossbred.
Yep.
Because that kind of like in my mind spurs like a, hey, you like this? We'll maybe mix it with this, and now we have something that's going to be a little bit more that's going to work a little bit better in San Diego climates.
Yep.
And like kind of expand the genetics, so it doesn't have like as many fungal issues and stuff. So that could be an awesome finding that like
and we've also discovered that based on soil studies, because we've also looked at soil microbial communities, because the soil microbial communities they form part of what's called the rhizosphere, and so they interact with the rhizomes or the roots and the in the plant to be able to fix nitrogen or be able to, break down some of the nutrients that are being seeped back into the soil. And soil microbes, people don't think twice about it, right, are a huge component of agriculture. There's modern techniques that allow us to sort of functionally understand what these communities look like, how do they change, how do they vary between different plant cultivars, and what are the interactions between the plant and its growth and everything that we are interested in the plant and the microbial communities inside of it. And we found some really cool stuff from our experiments there as well. We actually found that, at least from our preliminary experiments, that the US-based cultivars actually have much lower degrees of what we call alpha diversity. So this is just, total abundance of or diversity of microbial communities compared to the non-US cultivars, at least in controlled settings, which is super interesting because it almost looks like, they've been sort of domesticated to the point where, they have only a handful of microbial species that they interact with that have also kind of co-evolved, if you might, with some of those domesticated strains. And so those are the ones that we predominantly see when we grow them over a multiple, time period.
My oldest kid just had his birthday, and I got him I'm a fungi shirt. So we go look for mushrooms around the neighborhood, which is pretty fun. I get excited when he's excited about it, when he's referring it to as fungus is growing over there, not a mushroom. But attention brewing professionals, are you looking to elevate your presence in the heart of San Diego's craft beer industry? Consider joining the San Diego Brewers Guild as a professional or affiliate member today. Access exclusive benefits designed to propel your craft to new heights, gain entry to premier industry events and educational resources, and forge vital connections within our brewing community. Visit sdbeer.com to explore the full list of advantages that a membership offers. Join the Capital of Craft podcast and the San Diego Brewers Guild, celebrating craft beer in San Diego since 1997.
Malt Europe Malting Company is based in North America, specializing in growing and producing quality malts for the craft beer and distilling industries. With local farms and malt houses spread across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, our commitment to excellence is fully ingrained into every batch we produce, ensuring breweries and distilleries of any size can create the finest beverages on the planet. Visit www.malteuropemaltingco.com to learn how Malt Europe can support your malting needs. Contact us at customersuccess@malteurope.com or 844-546-MALT for questions or to place your order.
It would be interesting to see long-term with the biodiversity of the different crops around the hop plants and how that might play a role into the quantity or quality of
quality of the crop too, right? That is true, right? Because plants, any kind of agricultural operation is going to be detrimental in the long run to the soils, right? So then, we want to be mindful of our soils and be able to replenish the nutrients in the soils, right? Not just water, but also the nutrients. And a lot of that boils down to what kind of, fertilizer use regimes do you have? What kind of insecticide or pesticide use, if you do any of that, what does that look like? How does that leach into your soils? what kind of irrigation regimes do you have, right? Are you in San Diego County where you're growing most of your crops up on the hillside and you get a lot of rain, and then the topsoil essentially just washes down into the ocean, right? Which is depleting all of the topsoil nutrients that are present in the environment. So how do we actually sort of tread lightly when we come to sort of replenishing those micronutrients and macronutrients in the soils? So.
Yeah, and understand this is a beer podcast, but going back to a wine analogy, there's a region in Germany called the Moselle, and there's these big rocks that it's up on this big hill, and there's a river, and the light reflects off this river and gives the vineyard enough light to actually ripen the grapes. And the other side of the hill doesn't get that light without that reflection. But there's a story, whether how true it is now or not, I don't know, but they actually go to the bottom each year, take those rocks and bring them back to the top to help that soil from washing away. Which is just crazy.
Which is, what we, crazy ideas, but then again, you got to do what you got to do to be able to keep the soil doing what it should be doing, right? And giving back to. And
that might be a problem unique to San Diego, though, because most of the big hop farms in Yakima are flat. I mean, it's in a valley. It's kind of, just a stagnant area. There doesn't seem like there's a whole lot going on. They do get a lot of weather, but it's not. Hop country is beautiful in its own way, but it's not beautiful in the sense of big rolling hills where these vines are being grown.
And what a shame it would be to put all this money and effort into like improving your soil quality and have it washed down off your property.
So what do the next steps look like? This is, very early on what's a very fairly long-term project, and especially long-term in the sense that brewers might not see any results, if ever, for 5 to 10 years from now. What are the next steps on your end, and how would brewers stay involved and show interest?
So that's so we are looking at, this is a USDA funded project, at least for the next 5 years. And we just learned relatively recently that my PhD student, Alex, who's kind of spearheading a lot of this project work with the USDA, she just got funded through the California State University Agricultural Research Institute to run this multi-year drought tolerance experiment up in Santa Margarita Ecological Reserve in Temecula. And so we're going to have a multi-year experiment there. And, we're hoping to, like I said, involve more local brewers, home brewers, to be able to help us with crop improvement programs, which we will then work with the USDA in developing. But, really, I think a lot of, what we're looking at is to make sure that we are communicating our science to the general community, and that's both the brewing community as well as the farming community and the general public, right? We want to be able to say, hey, you know what? Guess what? We're doing all this cool science, but this is how this is going to help you in the long term of things. So we're going to be having a lot of public-facing events where the students that we are training in a variety of these scientific methods will be presenting their semester-wide or year-long research into the general public, right? So we can then generate more interest amongst people for brewing and for hops in general. So there's going to be multiple factions of this project, like I was mentioning. So the genetics part of it was what we were working on for this semester, and that's my expertise. Next semester, for instance, at CSU San Marcos, my colleagues, Dr. George Verlides and James Jankovic, who are both, soil ecologists and virologists, are looking to study a lot of the viruses that have been afflicting some of these strains. And what exactly are those viruses? And are some of these strains resistant or more resistant to some of these viruses? So they're going to be interested in looking at some of that. They're also going to be looking at soil quality and moisture content and the relationship with growth levels with hops. So, and they're going to be doing some of these experiments in a greenhouse setting, but also in in an actual natural setting out in the farm as well. So there's at least sort of several of these parallel efforts happening, and we're all sort of training students who will hopefully go into the industry as well, into the science part of it, working with brewers and, determining, alpha, beta acid compositions of some of these hops, as well as, how these are playing out and how are they interacting with different yeast strains while they're, brewing beer. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is obviously we're going to communicate our science, like I said, through some of these public-facing events, poster sessions. So come learn about our science, right? And also we hope to learn what matters to you from that process as well, right? We want to learn, because we're scientists and we're always kind of siloed into our own little world. And, we could do our experiments how much ever we want, but I think we learn a heck of a lot more when we actually have and meet, these public-facing events where we meet people, brewers, farmers, learn what they need and, what would better their lives. So come to some of these events. Obviously, feel free to hit me up sometime. Let's go grab a beer and we'll learn a little bit more about what interests you.
Awesome. Yeah. And the Brewers Guild is always happy to continue to push any of those events out for you too and help connect the dots on that. Yeah.
And we'll make sure to, when we post it, to share what are the upcoming events and everything like that. So if you're watching, make sure that to check down below and we'll have some of those listed. And also if you want to check on our Instagram, which is at SD Brewers, you'll be able to see a lot of those events on there. And, if they wanted to learn more about the program, would you want to either share your contact or whoever is gonna who they should reach out to?
Yeah, I'm happy to share all contacts, both for me, my PhD students, as well as Dr. Verlides and Jankovic at CSU San Marcos. Feel free to reach out to us, and we've been connecting and building some new connections as well with through the Brewers Guild, but also through farming communities and whatnot, which are pretty small in number at the moment in San Diego County, but we'd love to connect with more people who might be even small-scale homebrewers or growers of hops, so we can learn a little bit more about both the hop biology, but also what they're doing with them.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of gut feeling and experiences out there from people growing in their backyard over the years. I know I had 2 years. I had some different vines growing in my backyard, but... Yeah. Awesome. We want to thank you for coming in. It's been a pleasure, and I hope this can be a reoccurring segment over the next couple of years.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
We'd love to be back. Yeah.
And if you like this episode and want to see more, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And again, subscribe to us or check out our social media, SD Brewers, and to learn more about what's going on in the industry.
Cheers.
Cheers.